You are currently staring at your phone screen while a mountain of unfinished responsibilities quietly accumulates in the shadows of your mind. This seemingly harmless act of digital escapism is actually a sophisticated neurological surrender that is actively eroding your long-term cognitive potential. Your brain is likely lying to you about your true capacity to change because it prioritizes immediate comfort over your future survival. Does the person you claim to be actually match the repetitive and low-effort actions you have taken over the last 72 hours? There is a much more dangerous mental trap hidden beneath your surface-level procrastination that we have not yet even begun to uncover. You might believe you are simply resting, but your focus is currently a leaking bucket that loses more water with every mindless swipe. Remember that ambitious project you abandoned last June, because the initial spark of motivation was replaced by the cold reality of effort. Feel the subtle tension in your shoulders right now, as your subconscious recognizes the growing gap between your intentions and your reality. This single daily habit of choosing the path of least resistance is the first step toward a total liquidation of your discipline. If you cannot control your thumb for 10 minutes, you will eventually find yourself unable to steer the direction of your entire career. Repeated failures in small moments eventually aggregate into a fractured self-identity where you no longer believe the promises you make yourself. The systemic collapse of your potential is not a sudden event, but a slow and invisible tragedy occurring in the quietest hours. We are living in a precision-engineered age of softness where every local environment is designed to keep your ancient brain pacified. Your neurobiology is currently trapped in a world where food and entertainment are delivered instantly with the mere click of a plastic button. This environment creates a massive disconnect because your primitive survival hardware was forged through thousands of years of constant struggle and scarcity. Modern convenience acts as a biological sedative that tricks your nervous system into thinking you have already won the race of life. When the environment requires zero effort to survive, your inner drive for excellence begins to shrink like a wool sweater in boiling water. We have reached a point where struggle is viewed as a defect rather than the essential entrance fee for any meaningful human growth. Every time you choose the temporary numbing of a pizza or a streaming service, you are training your brain to fear discomfort. The hidden cost of this comfort is the slow death of your resilience, which we will explore through the lens of evolutionary biology. To understand why you feel so paralyzed by simple tasks, we must look back at how your ancestors survived in the wild. Evolution programmed your brain to conserve energy at all costs, because in the past every calorie was a matter of life or death. This survival mechanism suggests that your current laziness is actually just ancient hardware trying to protect you from a non-existent famine. You are essentially a high-performance racing engine being fueled by low-grade dopamine hits from social media and processed sugar and hollow rewards. Every time you engage in a digital loop, your brain releases a neurochemical reward that reinforces the habit of seeking effortless stimulation. The reckless sprinter archetype lives for these short bursts of energy, but quickly crashes into a state of total cognitive exhaustion. This downward spiral begins when your dopamine receptors become so desensitized that regular work feels physically painful or impossibly dull to complete. You might notice that your ability to read a single page of a book has been replaced by a frantic need for movement. This is the point where one small lapse in discipline leads to a complete liquidation of your self-worth for the entire day. If you do not break this cycle now, you will eventually lose the ability to feel satisfied by real and meaningful achievements. Your bank account and your closest relationships are direct reflections of the mental decay that occurs when you prioritize short-term comfort. A person who cannot manage their own internal impulses will inevitably find themselves being managed by the external demands of others. Observe your internal red flags, such as the physical urge to check your phone the moment a task becomes slightly confusing. This sudden desire to escape is a biological signal that your brain has hit a friction point and is attempting to retreat. The perfectionist procrastinator sits at this exact friction point, waiting for a perfect moment of clarity that will never actually arrive. You must realize that waiting for the right feeling is a sophisticated scam designed by your mind to keep you perfectly safe. Growth does not occur when you feel ready, but rather when you decide to move while your heart is still pounding in fear. We are about to explore the specific neurochemical escape path that allows you to re-engineer your environment for maximum mental toughness. Most people will spend their entire lives reacting to these hidden biological triggers without ever realizing they have a choice in the matter. Your journey toward an unshakable mindset starts by identifying the exact moment your brain tries to trade your future for a snack. You must confront the reality that your current environment acts as a persistent neurochemical trap designed to keep you in a state of passive consumption. The comfort zone bias suggests that your brain perceives any departure from your current routine as a literal threat to your physical safety. Every time you hesitate to start a difficult task, your amygdala is firing signals that trigger a primitive fight or flight response. This internal conflict creates a massive energy drain that leaves you feeling exhausted before you have even accomplished a single, meaningful objective. Most people mistake this mental fatigue for a lack of talent when it is actually just a poorly managed neurological system. If you continue to allow your primitive brain to dictate your schedule, you are essentially outsourcing your destiny to a prehistoric survival algorithm. The hidden cost of this submission is the slow erosion of your executive function, which is the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning. Notice how your ability to focus on a single, complex problem for more than 10 minutes has likely declined over the last 5 years. This decline is not an accident of age, but a direct consequence of a world that rewards fragmented attention and shallow thinking. The perfectionist procrastinator often uses research as a shield to avoid the vulnerability of actually putting their work into the world. By constantly searching for more information, you are tricking your brain into feeling productive, while your actual goals remain completely stagnant. True mental toughness appears to be less about brute force and more about the strategic management of your internal biological signals. You can begin to re-engineer your mindset by intentionally introducing small and controlled doses of voluntary discomfort into your daily routine. Neuroscience suggests that exposing yourself to cold water or difficult physical exercise can effectively recalibrate your brain's relationship with stress. These small wins act as proof to your subconscious that you are a person who follows through on their difficult commitments. Every time you complete a task that you previously dreaded, you are strengthening the neural pathways associated with self-regulation and grit. The reckless sprinter must learn that sustainable success is built through the boring and repetitive consistency of a long-distance runner. If you do not learn to find satisfaction in the process of the struggle, you will forever be a slave to the outcome. We are reaching a critical threshold where the gap between the disciplined and the distracted is becoming an unbridgeable social chasm. In the next section, we will reveal the specific psychological framework required to dismantle the excuse machine once and for all. The excuse machine operates by generating plausible narratives that allow you to bypass the emotional pain of being unproductive. Neuroscience suggests that your brain is more concerned with maintaining a consistent self-image than it is with your actual objective success. This means that when you fail to act, your mind creates a story to protect you from the crushing weight of your own disappointment. You may tell yourself that you are waiting for inspiration, but you are actually just succumbing to a low-level fear of social judgment. Observe how the comparison monster feeds on your insecurity by highlighting the finished products of others while ignoring their messy behind-the-scenes struggles. When you compare your internal beginning to someone else's external middle, you are effectively poisoning your own neurochemical motivation system. This mental friction leads to a state of chronic anxiety where you feel both behind in life and yet physically unable to move. The perfectionist procrastinator often believes that high standards are their greatest strength when they are actually a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. If your standards are so high that you never actually finish a task, you are essentially living in a state of professional delusion. True excellence appears to be a statistical byproduct of a high volume of imperfect work, rather than a single moment of genius. Every time you publish a flawed project or complete a messy workout, you are training your brain to tolerate the reality of effort. Your executive function thrives on the clear and unambiguous feedback that only comes from taking physical action in the real world. Without this feedback loop, your mind begins to spin into a vacuum of overthinking that results in total cognitive paralysis. The downward spiral of identity erosion occurs when you can no longer distinguish between your genuine limitations and your habitual excuses. You might find that your self-worth has become tied to your potential, rather than your actual, tangible contributions to the world around you. This is a dangerous mental state because potential is an infinite resource that requires zero actual effort to maintain or discuss. To break this trap, you must adopt a growth mindset that views every failure as a data point rather than a personal indictment. Biological reality dictates that your brain will only allocate deep focus to the tasks it perceives as truly essential for your survival. By intentionally raising the stakes and creating accountability, you can trick your nervous system into prioritizing your long-term goals over comfort. In the next segment, we will analyze the exact neurological signals that indicate when you are successfully entering a state of deep work. Deep work is a physiological state where your prefrontal cortex operates at maximum efficiency to solve highly complex problems. Neuroscience suggests that it takes approximately 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus to reach this level of cognitive immersion. Every time you check a notification, you are effectively resetting this 20-minute timer and flushing your progress away. This constant switching creates a phenomenon called attention residue, where your brain remains partially stuck on the previous distraction. You might feel like you are multitasking, but you are actually just rapidly degrading your IQ through constant context switching. The reckless sprinter often mistakes business for productivity because their brain is addicted to the small dopamine hits of answering emails. True productivity appears to be the ability to sit in a room alone with a single difficult task until it is finished. Your environment is currently winning the war for your attention because you have made distraction the path of least resistance. By leaving your phone in another room, you are creating a physical barrier that reduces the cognitive load of resisting temptation. Self-discipline is a finite resource that functions much like a muscle that can be exhausted by too many trivial choices. If you spend your morning deciding what to eat and what to wear, you are depleting the energy needed for deep work. Observe how the most successful individuals automate their mundane daily routines to preserve their mental fuel for high-stakes decision-making. The perfectionist procrastinator struggles here because they want the perfect system before they feel comfortable enough to actually begin working. You must accept that your first attempt at deep work will likely feel clunky and frustrating and mentally painful. This mental pain is actually the sensation of your neural circuits being rewired to handle higher levels of complexity and focus. If you retreat the moment the work feels hard, you are essentially training your brain to stay at a shallow level. The downward spiral of career stagnation occurs when you become a generalist who is easily replaced by a basic automation script. High-value skills require the kind of deep focus that most of your peers are no longer physically capable of maintaining. By reclaiming your ability to focus, you are positioning yourself in the top 1% of the modern global workforce. In the next part, we will discuss how to build a self-awareness dashboard to monitor your internal signals in real time. Your self-awareness dashboard begins with the ability to label your internal physiological states as they occur in real time. Neuroscience suggests that naming an emotion can actually reduce the activity in your amygdala and restore your rational thinking. When you feel the sudden urge to abandon your work, you should silently label it as a primitive avoidance response. By observing the urge rather than immediately acting upon it, you are creating a crucial gap in your neurological circuitry. This gap is where your free will lives, and it is the only place where true behavioral change is actually possible. Most people operate on a purely reactive level, where every internal impulse is translated into an immediate physical action. The reckless sprinter fails because they mistake their fluctuating emotional energy for their actual permanent capacity to perform work. You must learn to decouple your daily actions from your temporary moods if you want to build a bulletproof mindset. Professionalism appears to be the simple act of showing up and performing at a high level, regardless of internal resistance. If you only work when you feel motivated, you are essentially a leaf being blown around by a neurochemical breeze. The perfectionist procrastinator uses their high level of self-awareness to overanalyze their flaws rather than to fix their behaviors. Analysis paralysis is often just a sophisticated defense mechanism used by the ego to avoid the risk of being average. You must give yourself permission to produce mediocre work in the short term to achieve exceptional results in the long term. Every messy draft you complete acts as a psychological anchor that prevents you from drifting back into a state of inaction. The downward spiral of self-worth often accelerates when you begin to identify as a failure rather than someone who failed. Habitual failure in small tasks creates a cognitive bias, where you begin to anticipate defeat before the game even begins. To reverse this decay, you must intentionally manufacture small victories that provide immediate evidence of your own personal agency. Biological reality suggests that your brain will naturally shift toward the identity that provides the most consistent sense of safety. By proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort, you are redefining your safety as competence rather than passive avoidance. In the next part, we will outline the specific environmental architecture required to automate your most difficult daily habits. Environmental architecture is the science of designing your physical surroundings to make your desired behaviors completely frictionless and inevitable. Neuroscience suggests that your visual field serves as a primary trigger for the release of neurotransmitters that drive your daily actions. If you see your gym shoes the moment you wake up, your brain begins to prepare for physical exertion automatically. Conversely, if your smartphone is the first thing you touch, you are conditioning your mind to seek instant and passive rewards. Most people fail to change because they rely on the fragile resource of willpower, rather than the stable power of environment. The reckless sprinter attempts to use massive bursts of willpower to overcome a chaotic environment which inevitably leads to burnout. You should treat your environment like a high-precision laboratory, where every object has a specific purpose for your cognitive development. By removing the batteries from your television remote, you are increasing the response effort required to engage in low-value consumption. This slight increase in physical friction is often enough to allow your rational prefrontal cortex to regain control of your choices. The perfectionist procrastinator spends too much time organizing their environment and not enough time actually operating within it for results. True environmental mastery involves setting up your space once and then focusing entirely on the execution of your primary mission. Observe how your physical energy levels fluctuate throughout the day and match your most difficult tasks to your peak hours. Biological reality dictates that you should perform deep work during your periods of highest alertness and save mundane tasks for later. If you attempt to solve complex problems while your brain is chemically exhausted, you are training yourself to associate work with pain. The downward spiral of productivity often begins when you ignore these biological signals and try to force a result through exhaustion. By respecting your circadian rhythms, you are working with your biology rather than constantly fighting against your own neurological nature. Every time you align your environment with your biological needs, you are making the path of excellence much easier to follow. Habit restructuring is not about a sudden transformation, but about the slow and steady accumulation of small environmental wins. You are essentially the architect of your own character, and your daily surroundings are the bricks and mortar of your identity. In the final part, we will synthesize these lessons into a definitive choice between intentional growth and slow and visible decay. You have reached the final moral choice between the painful path of intentional growth and the slow tragedy of staying the same. Biological reality dictates that there is no neutral gear in the human brain because you are either evolving or you are decaying. If you choose to do nothing today, you are not simply standing still, but are actively reinforcing the neural pathways of submission. Every hour spent in passive consumption is a direct liquidation of the time you could have used to build a lasting legacy. The reckless sprinter will likely feel a temporary burst of motivation right now, but will fail to implement a single structural change. You must realize that your future self is a real person who will eventually have to live with the consequences of your laziness. Imagine meeting the version of yourself that achieved everything you currently dream of and feeling the weight of your own wasted potential. This is the ultimate systemic collapse, where the gap between who you are and who you could have been becomes a permanent regret. You have been given the scientific tools and the psychological framework to dismantle the invisible traps that have kept you playing small. The perfectionist procrastinator will want to watch this video again before starting when they should instead just close the tab and work. Your brain suggests that tomorrow is a safer time to begin, but tomorrow is a mythical land that does not actually exist. True transformation is a slow and grinding process that occurs in the mundane moments when no one is watching or offering applause. You must learn to fall in love with the boredom of the work because that is where your high-value skills are truly forged. Observe the physical sensation of resistance in your body right now and recognize it as the final barrier to your new identity. Breaking through this barrier requires you to stop being a consumer of self-help and start being an architect of your own reality. By taking one concrete and difficult action in the next 5 minutes, you are signaling to your subconscious that the old rules are dead. This is your red pill moment, where the comfortable illusions of your past are stripped away to reveal the raw power of choice. The evolution of your mindset is a lifelong mission that requires constant vigilance against the seductive pull of modern convenience and softness. You are no longer a victim of your biology or your environment, but a conscious operator with the power to rewrite your code. The screen will go dark in a moment, and the only thing that will matter is what you decide to do next.